Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, shadowy walk into a world where you are not the hero, not the noble knight, not even the merchant with a warm bed and a full belly. No, tonight you're an assassin in the Middle Ages, and trust me, you probably won't survive this, not because you'll get caught in some dramatic rooftop chase, but because the job itself is designed to chew you up and spit you out faster than you can say, "Wait, how much am I getting paid?" So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you right now, and what time is it for you? I love imagining all of us together across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice about this line of work is the absence of anything resembling a contract you'd want to sign. There's no parchment with tidy ink promising you gold on completion, no steady paycheck. What you have is a whispered offer from someone you may never see again, a nod in a tavern corner, a coin slid across the table to prove they're serious. And that coin? It might be the only payment you ever see if they vanish, decide you failed, or simply don't want to pay. The truth is, medieval assassins lived on the thinnest thread of trust, and that thread frayed fast. If you were hired by a noble, you might think, great, deep pockets. But deep pockets often come with deep paranoia. One day you're doing their dirty work, the next, they're quietly arranging for someone else to clean up you. Historians still argue whether assassins in medieval courts were mostly freelancers or permanently attached to powerful patrons, but either way, it rarely ended with retirement and a cottage by the sea. You quickly learn that the career ladder is more of a slippery rope, and most people fall off. You don't negotiate rates because negotiating suggests you think you're worth more than the employer believes. And that's dangerous. Sometimes they'll offer a sack of silver, but the sack turns out to be half filled with rocks to bulk it up. You catch this only when you weigh it in your hands later, far away from their guards. And let's talk about the life expectancy. The average person in the Middle Ages might have lived into their 40s if they were lucky and avoided plague, famine, or battle. You'd be lucky to make it past 30. Not because of the plague, but because of all the extra sharp objects pointed in your direction. There's no pension plan. Your severance package is, well, you get severed. Oddly enough, one of the fringe details you wouldn't expect is that in certain parts of medieval Italy, some assassins were also hired to stage attacks that looked like accidents, pushing someone into a canal, loosening a balcony railing. It paid a little better because it was supposed to be subtle, but the margin for error was terrifyingly small. Miss your moment and you were just an awkward stranger loitering by a very dead nobleman's balcony. Most days you're stuck in limbo waiting for the next job. Waiting is dangerous. You need to eat, but without income you start selling whatever you have. A weapon here, a cloak there, until you're working with the bare minimum, which makes the next job even riskier. And all the while you're keeping your head down because someone else's job might be you. Even your friends, if you dare to call them that, aren't much help. They don't want to be associated with you for fear of being seen as part of your world. So you become a shadow of a person in public, silent, unremarkable, and almost invisible. And in a strange way, that invisibility seeps into you. You start to forget the sound of your own laughter, because laughing loudly in a tavern could mean someone recognizes your voice from a dark alley a month ago. Every coin you get feels heavier than gold, not because of its value, but because of the danger it represents. You can't spend it too quickly without raising suspicion. And you can't save too much in one place because a thief might take it, or your employer might. This isn't just job insecurity, it's existential insecurity. You live between the lines of history, unnamed, unwanted. unwanted, and yet needed just enough to keep going. That's the bitter irony of this life. You're disposable, but until your disposal, you're essential. You think the job itself is the hard part. It's not. It's the training that leaves you cursing the day you decided to pick up a dagger. From the moment you're invited, and let's be honest, it's usually more of a threat than an invitation, into the world of medieval assassination, your body becomes a constant battleground. Your mornings start before dawn, when the streets are still slick with dew, and the only light is the ghostly glow of tallow candles. You're dragged out of whatever sorry excuse for a bed you have, pushed into a courtyard and ordered to run laps. Not for your health, but because your legs need to carry you quickly over cobblestones, rooftops, and sometimes through swampy marshland without tripping. There's no polite warm-up, no gentle stretching. You just run until your lungs feel like they're on fire, and then you run some more. Weapon practice follows, and it's not glamorous swordplay. Forget the smooth, balletic moves you see in modern reenactments. Instead, you're hacking away at a straw dummy until your arms ache, or trying to hold a crossbow steady while your fingers cramp from the rough twine of the string. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins preferred smaller, easily concealed blades over larger, more intimidating weapons. But your trainers make sure you can use everything, just in case. That means hours learning how to swing a mace without breaking your own wrist, or how to throw a knife with enough force to pierce leather. And then there's the stealth training, if you can even call it that. It involves ridiculous exercises like crouching in the shadows for hours while your instructor deliberately tries to make you flinch by dropping pebbles nearby, or sneaking across a creaky wooden floor without making a sound while carrying a bucket of water. If you spill even a drop, you start again. The worst part? The strange medieval belief that endurance builds loyalty. So the more they make you suffer in training, the more they think you'll stick around because you've invested so much pain. And maybe they're right. Because after a few weeks of bruised ribs, twisted ankles, and rope burns from endless climbing drills, you start to believe you've gone too far to quit. One quirky but very real tidbit you pick up. In some guild-like circles, assassins were trained to walk with a limp, not because they were injured, but because it threw off anyone trying to identify their footprints later. So between your deliberately awkward gait and your constant aches, you begin to feel twice your age. Food isn't much comfort either. Training diets are heavy on stale bread, onions, and thin broth. Meat is rare, unless you're celebrating a completed job, and even then, the meat is usually overcooked, or so salted it makes you thirstier than before. You'd think they'd at least give you better meals for the energy you need. But no, scarcity is part of the mental conditioning. Hunger keeps you sharp, or so they say. By the end of each day, you're too sore to sleep properly. Every muscle protests and your hands sting from the constant practice of tying and untying knots for climbing. The nights offer no relief, because you dream of falling from rooftops or having your weapon slip just when you need it most. But here's the thing. As much as you resent it, you can't deny that you're getting better. Your balance improves. Your reflexes sharpen. You start noticing the smallest shifts in light, the faintest sounds in the distance. The world becomes one long, continuous training ground. Every step you take in public is a rehearsal for survival. Still, that doesn't make the bruises fade any faster, or the blisters hurt any less. And no matter how skilled you get, there's always the lurking thought that all this effort might just be preparing you for a mission you won't survive. After all that punishing training, you'd think your tools would at least make life easier. But in the medieval assassin's trade, weapons are just as likely to betray you as your so-called allies. You start to realize that your survival depends not just on skill, but on the temperament of inanimate objects that have no interest in your well-being. Let's start with daggers. They look reliable, compact, Easy to conceal, simple to use. But medieval steel is a fickle friend. If the blacksmith who forged your blade had an off day, you might end up with a dagger that bends on impact or dulls after just a few uses. And then there's rust. It creeps in overnight, blooming along the edge like some metallic disease. You spend hours scraping, oiling, and sharpening, because a dull blade isn't just useless, it's dangerous. In a real fight, if your weapon doesn't bite into your target on the first strike, you'll be the one bleeding instead. Crossbows promise distance, and distance sounds safe, until you're fumbling with a stiff bowstring in the rain. Loading one is slow enough in daylight. At night, under pressure, it's like threading a needle while someone's trying to kill you. Historians still argue whether compact, easily concealable crossbows were ever widely used by covert killers, or if they were more of a battlefield tool adapted for darker purposes. Either way, you find yourself cursing the thing more than praising it. Then there's poison, the supposed sophisticated choice. In theory, it's elegant. Slip a bit of powder into a drink, or smear a toxin along the edge of your blade, and the job is done. In practice, it's a gamble. Recipes vary wildly, often passed down by word of mouth, and you never quite know whether you've brewed something lethal or just a nasty-tasting soup. Worse, making the stuff is dangerous. A little carelessness and you're the one getting sick, dizzy, or worse. And even if the poison works perfectly, it comes with complications. Sometimes it acts too slowly, and you have to stick around to confirm the result, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. Other times it acts too fast, drawing unwanted attention. You can't exactly explain to a room full of suspicious nobles why the man you were just chatting with is now foaming at the mouth. One quirky but inconvenient fact you learn quickly. In some parts of Europe, assassins carried weighted clubs, not for killing but for quietly knocking someone out before dragging them away. Sounds neat until you actually try to use one. It's awkward, heavy, and in cramped spaces you're more likely to hit the door frame than your target. The worst feeling is when you have the perfect opportunity and your tool fails you. A dagger slips in your sweaty grip. A crossbow misfires with a pathetic twang. A poisoned cup gets knocked over before your target drinks it. Each failure doesn't just mean the job's undone. It means you've been seen, and now you are the target. You start to treat every weapon like a moody partner. You coax it, care for it, talk to it in the quiet moments. Not because you're superstitious, though many in your trade are, but because you've learned that familiarity is the only way to limit surprises. And in your world, surprises are never good. The irony is that even with all this maintenance, even with the hours you spend oiling blades and drying bowstrings by the fire, there's no guarantee your weapon will work when it matters most. And when that moment comes, you won't have time to curse it. You'll either adapt in seconds or you'll join the long list of assassins whose tools let them down at the worst possible time. You quickly discover that in this business, the deadliest disguise isn't a mask or a hood. It's pretending to be just another face in the crowd. The problem is, medieval clothing is not exactly designed for comfort, and blending in often means spending your day wrapped in the textile equivalent of a punishment. You're issued garments that match whatever class or trade you're posing as. If you're meant to pass as a laborer, expect coarse wool tunics that scratch at your skin like they're trying to start a fire. Wool in the summer is a slow torture. Wool in the winter is still itchy, just slightly less miserable. The dye is usually uneven, and if you're unlucky, the leftover tannins in the fabric leave faint brown stains on your skin. If you're aiming for something a little higher up the social ladder, maybe a merchant's apprentice or a minor clerk, you get a cloak or hood that looks smarter, but smells like it's been stored in a damp chest for a decade. And that hood, it itches your scalp, traps heat, and blocks your peripheral vision just enough to make rooftop work a gamble. There's also the smell. Bathing isn't a daily event in the Middle Ages, and your disguise needs to match the people around you. That means wearing the same unwashed clothes day after day until they develop their own unique personality. You might think this would help you hide, but it also means you start smelling yourself, which is both distracting and faintly demoralizing. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins had access to specialized stage clothing, lighter fabrics, hidden pockets, or garments treated with wax to resist weather. If such gear existed, you certainly don't have it. You get whatever your handler can procure, often from pawn shops or stolen from unfortunate strangers. The fit is never perfect, and the seams always seem to rub in the wrong places. Then there's footwear. Good boots are expensive, so you usually end up in whatever is available. Worn leather shoes with thin soles that let you feel every pebble, or clunky work boots that announce your presence with each step. You try to walk softly, but the cobblestones betray you, and if it rains, the leather soaks through and your feet squish with every step for days. One oddly specific detail you notice: a certain type of hooded cloak, popular with market vendors, has a long point at the back. It's perfect for hooking on low doorways and open shutters when you're in a hurry, which is exactly the opposite of what you want. You learn to tilt your head forward to avoid snags, which gives you a permanent stoop that makes you look older than you are. You adapt, of course. You practice moving naturally, letting your disguise dictate your body language. If you're dressed like a peasant, you slouch and shuffle. If you're posing as a clerk, you walk briskly and avoid eye contact, as though late for an appointment. It's a strange kind of acting, and it becomes second nature, until you forget who you're supposed to be halfway through the day and have to improvise. The bitter truth is that the best disguise is one you hate. If you're comfortable, you stand out, because comfort means expense, and expense means status, and status draws eyes. So you embrace the itch, the stink, the awkward fit, because those things keep you invisible, and in your world, invisible means alive. Getting close to your target sounds so much easier when it's whispered in the safety of a candlelit planning room. Out here, in the real world, every step toward them feels like a gamble. The streets are narrow, choked with people during the day, and eerily empty at night. The air smells of roasting meat, horse droppings, and wood smoke, each scent layered over the other until they blur into a permanent haze in your mind. You start moving, weaving through the crowd. Your boots, even when you try to be careful, hit the cobblestones with a sound you can't entirely silence. You've wrapped the soles with a strip of cloth to muffle them, but the damp streets turn that cloth into a soggy mess within minutes. Sometimes you envy the barefoot beggars. They move quieter than you ever could. The guards are the worst part. They stand at corners or drift slowly down the lanes, their eyes always half bored but never unfocused. You can feel their gaze skim over you, weighing whether you're a threat. You keep your head down, just enough to hide your face but not so much that you look suspicious. The balance is exhausting. One wrong tilt, and you either look defiant or guilty. And then there's the terrain itself. The medieval city wasn't built for stealth. You have tight alleyways that seem perfect for slipping away, until you realize they're dead ends. Market stalls jut into the streets, their sharp corners ready to catch your cloak. And the paving stones aren't level, which means one misstep can send you stumbling at the exact wrong moment. Historians still argue whether professional killers in this era used spotters in the crowd to guide them closer to their quarry. You don't have that luxury. It's just you, your memory of where they'll be, and your ability to avoid looking like you're heading straight for them, and you can't afford to look at them too early. Eyes are louder than footsteps. Even once you get within striking range, the problem doesn't stop. If the target is talking to someone, you have to wait. If they're in a well-lit area, you have to wait. If they've stopped in the middle of an open square, you might wait so long you start to feel the sweat pooling at the base of your neck, which is a terrible time to sneeze. And then there are the unexpected variables, the ones no one prepares you for. Like the town drunk suddenly latching onto your arm, mistaking you for a friend. Or a child chasing a chicken right into your path, forcing you to pause or risk trampling them. These little delays compound, stretching what was supposed to be a quick approach into a slow-motion ordeal. The truth you learn, painfully and quickly, is that the hardest part of getting close to your target is not being noticed before you get there. That requires patience, improvisation, and the ability to look like you belong exactly where you are, even if your heart is pounding like a drum in your chest. You're not just fighting the guards, the crowd, and the streets. You're fighting every instinct you have to look at your target, to rush the last few steps. You have to smother that urgency under layers of calm, just like you smother the sound of your boots with wet rags. And when you finally get close enough, when their voice is clear in your ears, and you can see the tiny movement of their hands as they speak, that's when you remember you still have to make it out alive. You once imagined night work as something thrilling, moonlight glinting off rooftops, shadows wrapping around you like a cloak, the air cool and quiet. In reality, the darkness is more foe than friend. Yes, it hides you from prying eyes, but it also hides every loose tile, every sudden drop, every black pit in the street that could swallow your ankle whole. The lamps in the richer quarters are few and far between, their pools of light more a hazard than a help. Step into one accidentally and you might as well shout your name to the nearest guard. Step too far away from them, and you risk walking straight into a water trough or tripping over the tail of a sleeping dog. And dogs, unlike humans, don't pretend not to notice you. The rooftops are worse. You learn quickly that medieval houses aren't uniform. One roof might slope gently, the next drops off at a steep angle slick with moss. You take a cautious step and feel your boot skid, the rush of near falling leaving your stomach somewhere 3 stories below. There's no good way to run quietly across them. Tiles rattle underfoot, and more than once you've sent a fragment tumbling down into the street, the sound echoing louder than it should in the still air. Historians still argue whether assassins favored rooftops or stuck to the shadows of the street. After your first few missions, you see the appeal of keeping your feet on solid ground. At least there, the hazards aren't falling off. But the streets at night come with their own dangers. Drunken revelers stumble home from the tavern, eager for conversation or a fight. Street vendors pack up their carts late, blocking entire lanes. Rats scatter across your path in sudden bursts, making you flinch in a way you pray no one sees. And then there's the cold. It sinks into your fingers and toes first, numbing them until you can barely feel the dagger hilt in your palm. Some nights it's the wind, sharp, slicing, finding every gap in your clothing. Other nights it's the damp, soaking your boots and clinging to your skin under the layers. On a bad night, you get both. There's no romantic moonlit glow here. The moon, when it shows itself, casts long, stark shadows that seem to move when you're not looking. And you know it's not paranoia to think some of them are moving. Night guards sometimes forgo torches to keep their presence hidden. You carry no lantern of your own. Light betrays, and you've learned to rely on your ears as much as your eyes. The crunch of gravel, the creak of wood, the shift of fabric, all tell you more than the faint outlines your eyes catch. Still, the human mind likes patterns, and every time you see a shape in the dark that might be a doorway, you half expect it to be a person instead. What no one tells you is how heavy the dark feels after hours of moving through it. It presses in on you, a constant reminder that you are only ever a few steps away from an unseen obstacle, an unseen enemy, or an unseen mistake. And yet, for all its danger, you still prefer it to broad daylight. At least in the dark, the world is equally blind, even if it means you're just as likely to be betrayed by the shadow you hide in. If the dark is tricky, the weather is downright treacherous. You've learned to dread the skies almost as much as the guards. A perfect plan can unravel with the first drop of rain. The sound of it hitting the rooftops masks your own movements. That's the good part. But it also turns tiles into slick death traps and alleys into rivers. You try moving with care, but there's no way to avoid the mud that sucks at your boots and leaves a trail of footprints for anyone sharp enough to follow. Snow is no kinder. It makes everything slow, your steps crunching no matter how carefully you tread. Even the air feels louder, each breath fogging out in front of you like a flare. You wrap a scarf across your face, but then your breath dampens the fabric, and before long it's stiff with frost. Historians still argue whether assassins in colder climates adapted special winter gear or just took fewer contracts in the harshest months. Judging by your own shivering, you'd happily believe the latter. And then there's summer. People imagine that's the easy season, but they've clearly never had to melt into the crowd under a blistering sun while wearing layers of wool and leather. Sweat stings your eyes, sticks your shirt to your back, and leaves you smelling like the tanner's yard before you've even reached your target. Worse, the bright light strips away every shadow, making concealment an exercise in pure invention. Wind, too, has a mind of its own. On rooftops, it pushes you sideways with unexpected force, teasing at your balance. In the streets, it whips your cloak around, threatening to snag it on door handles or expose the weapons you've tried so carefully to hide. You once lost a poisoned needle to a sudden gust. Never did find it, though you imagine some unlucky rat got quite a surprise. And while you'd think fog might be your ally, it can just as easily betray you. It muffles sound and blurs vision, yes, but it also makes it harder to find your way. Once, you followed the wrong shadow for 10 full minutes before realizing it wasn't your target at all, just a merchant heading home. By the time you corrected your course, the opportunity was gone. What the weather teaches you, harshly, repeatedly, is that it doesn't care about your plans. You can predict the guard's patrol, memorize the alleys, and time your approach to the hour. But a sudden downpour or heat wave will turn all that precision into a gamble. And in this profession, a gamble often costs more than you can afford. So you adapt. You wrap your boots in strips for traction in the rain. You carry an extra layer for the cold, ready to abandon it if you need to move faster. You time your work to avoid the worst of the day's heat. But you always know, that no matter what you do, the sky will always have the final say. Poison, the great myth of the assassin's trade. Outsiders imagine you with a pouch of mysterious powders and vials, each deadly in a single drop. They picture you slipping something into a goblet at a banquet, your victim quietly keeling over while you melt into the crowd. And yes, sometimes it works like that, but more often than not, poison is less a magic trick and more a long, frustrating science experiment that might just kill you first. The first problem is making it. The recipes vary wildly. Some say crushed belladonna leaves, others swear by ground arsenic mixed into wine, and the really ambitious suggest exotic imports like snake venom or scorpion tails. The trouble is, those ingredients aren't just lying around. Belladonna doesn't grow in every hedge, snakes aren't keen to donate venom, and the merchants who sell rare toxins tend to ask questions you don't want to answer. Then, there's the brewing itself. Without a precise scale or clean glassware, you're guessing quantities. A little too much heat, and your concoction loses potency. Too little, and it doesn't dissolve. The smell can give you away, too. Some poisons stink like rotting garlic, Others like bitter almonds, both of which tend to draw attention if you're working in a cramped room above a tavern. And handling the stuff? Dangerous beyond reason. A careless touch to your mouth or eye, and you're your own victim. You've heard of assassins who kept antidotes tucked away, but they were expensive, rare, and often just another gamble. Might save you, might not. Historians still argue whether medieval antidotes were mostly superstition or had any real medicinal effect. You're not about to test the theory. Even if you manage to brew the perfect toxin, delivering it is a nightmare. Food testers are common in noble households, and taverns often have the habit of mixing up mugs before serving them. Slip something into the wrong one, and you might take out a random merchant instead of your target, and good luck explaining that to your employer. And here's the thing. Poison isn't always instant. Sometimes it's hours before the victim feels anything, sometimes days. In that time, they could travel, change their routine, or, worst of all, get suspicious. You've had to watch someone drink, then follow them discreetly for hours to see if it takes hold. Those are long, tense nights where you question whether a clean blade wouldn't have been simpler. Still, the mystique of poison lingers. Clients like the idea. It feels clever, subtle, even elegant. They don't think about the burns on your hands from caustic ingredients, the sleepless nights over whether the dose will work, or the lingering fear that a trace of it is still under your fingernails. And they never think about the possibility that one day you might be on the receiving end of the very same trick. Silence is supposed to be your greatest weapon, but in truth it's also your heaviest burden. You can't boast about your work, not even the truly impressive ones, the kind that involved 3 disguises, a midnight river crossing, and a rooftop escape under a full moon. You can't tell a friend over ale that the nobleman everyone thinks died of a fever was actually your handiwork. You can't even casually hint at it, because once someone starts suspecting, the questions don't stop. Your coin purse is another problem. You get paid in bursts, a handful of silver here, a rare gold coin there, but you can't spend it too fast without raising eyebrows. Buy a fine cloak overnight, and suddenly the innkeeper who thought you were just another wandering laborer starts wondering where you came into the money. Historians still argue whether assassins blended better into society as lowly tradesmen or minor mercenaries, but either way, the key is modesty. You can't afford to look rich even when you are. And then there's the loneliness. The price of silence isn't just avoiding loose talk, it's avoiding the connections that might tempt you to share. You keep people at arm's length because every bond is a liability. A friend might notice your absences, your odd injuries, your reluctance to answer simple questions. Worse, they might be used against you. Hostages are an easy tool for anyone who wants leverage over someone like you. There are times when you're sitting alone in a dim tavern corner, pretending to nurse the same mug of ale for hours, that you feel like you're watching life from behind glass. Everyone else gets to laugh, argue, complain about their bosses, while you keep your true stories locked away. The tension becomes a permanent weight between your shoulder blades. A quirky but grim reality. Even your handwriting has to stay hidden. In some towns, authorities keep samples of suspected criminals' marks or signatures. One scrap of a note could tie you to a job months later. So you write little, and when you do, it's in a hand so clumsy it looks like a child's scrawl. Harder to trace, but still another part of yourself you have to fake. Silence in the end isn't a skill you master. It's a diet you're never allowed to break. No indulgence in storytelling, no proud recounting of close calls. Just a constant swallowing of your own words until the line between self-control and self-erasure starts to blur. You learn early on that the law isn't a system you can out-argue or appeal to. It's a hammer that comes down hard, no matter how thin the evidence. Medieval justice is quick, public, and designed to terrify everyone watching. Once suspicion falls on you, it doesn't take much to tip you from traveler to criminal. A dagger in your pack? Suspicious. Being in the wrong part of town after dark? Suspicious. A noble whispering your name? Fatal. Running from the law isn't a rare emergency. It's a constant state of readiness. You keep mental maps of alleys, gates, rooftops, and even sewer entrances in every town you work. You notice which market stalls have canvas awnings you can duck under, which bakeries keep their back doors open, and which warehouses have loose boards in their walls. Historians still argue whether medieval city planning helped or hindered fugitives, but from your perspective, the jumble of streets and uneven walls is both a curse and a blessing. The guards themselves are unpredictable. Some are lazy, more interested in finishing their ale than chasing you. Others take their job personally, and once they've seen your face, they'll hound you for weeks. The worst are the bounty hunters. They have no uniform, no code, and no reason to care if you're guilty or not, as long as they can collect the reward. Even when you're not being actively hunted, you're haunted by the possibility. Every knock on the door makes you freeze. Every raised voice in the street could be calling your name. A quirky little precaution. You've learned to always have a half-packed bundle ready to grab, some bread, a water skin, and a change of clothes, in case you have to vanish before the hourglass runs out. And vanishing isn't glamorous. It means abandoning coins you haven't collected, safe houses you've built trust in, and the one or two people you almost felt comfortable around. The law doesn't just chase you down, it erases the thin roots you've dared to grow. In a world where your profession is unspoken and your allies are temporary, every escape is survival, but every survival costs you a little more of your place in the world. In your line of work, trust is a currency more fragile than the thinnest coin, and often just as easily bent out of shape. When a noble, merchant, or back alley contact hires you, it's rarely the beginning of a stable partnership. More often, it's the start of a short countdown until they decide you're too dangerous to keep alive. After all, you know their secrets. You've seen their face when they plotted a murder, and you've held their fate in your palm. Some will try to tie up loose ends with more work, sending you on follow-up contracts that just happen to put you in absurd danger. Others take the simpler route. Pay a rival to remove you before you can cause them any trouble. Historians still argue whether this cycle of employer betrayal kept the assassin population small or simply more paranoid. From your perspective, it just means that every handshake feels like the beginning of a chess game you didn't ask to play. Even merchants, those seemingly harmless clients, can be the worst. A trade deal gone wrong? Suddenly, the merchant who hired you to deal with a competitor is accusing you of blackmail. Nobles with their armies and legal power are less subtle. They just send guards to escort you for questioning, and you don't need a historian to tell you that's not a meeting you come back from. Quirky but deadly truth. Sometimes they'll pay you with items instead of coins, jewelry, fine fabrics, or rare spices, not as generosity, but as bait. Try to sell them, and you might find the buyer is their associate, ready to turn you in. So, you learn to leave quickly after a job. You never meet in the same place twice. You avoid sharing a drink after payment, and you never, ever accept a bonus that comes in the form of a dinner invitation. In this profession, loyalty is just another disguise, one that wears thin the moment the job is done. Illness, injury, exhaustion, none of them excuse you from finishing a contract. In a medieval assassin's world, there's no such thing as a sick day. If you can stand, you work. If you can crawl, you work slower. If you can't move, well, someone else finishes the job and probably finishes you too. It's not just the obvious dangers, blade cuts, bruised ribs, or twisted ankles from a badly timed rooftop leap. Even a mild fever can turn deadly when you're sleeping in damp corners, breathing in the smoke from too many tallow lamps. You can't exactly stroll into a public bathhouse or physician's shop without risking recognition, and even if you could, medieval medicine is questionable. Historians still argue whether certain treatments helped at all or simply made patients worse, and when the prescription involves crushed worms or burning a wound with hot iron, you're not eager to test it. The quirkiest and most uncomfortable part of staying on the job while sick? The smells. Without proper baths, your sweat when you're feverish is memorable. A client once told you to stand downwind during payment, and you weren't even offended. You were relieved they didn't recognize you. You improvise remedies from whatever you can find. A poultice made from moss, a scarf soaked in vinegar to ward off bad air, even sipping boiled onion water for coughs. None of them really work, but they give you the illusion of control. And sometimes that illusion is all that keeps you moving, because stopping isn't an option. If you limp back to a safe house instead of finishing the job, you risk more than a missed payday. You risk your reputation, your next contract, and your life. So you wrap the bandage tighter, pull your hood lower, and keep moving, even as every step reminds you that in this trade, weakness is just another word for target. You might think other assassins would be your natural allies, people who understand the risks, the secrecy, the constant balancing act between shadows and survival. In reality, they're just as likely to be the knife in your back as the hand that pulls you up. The competition is fierce, and there's no guild handbook that says you can't steal someone else's contract or client. Jobs are limited, and word spreads quickly when there's coin to be made. If a noble posts a reward for a delicate job, you can be sure at least 3 other assassins heard about it before you even finished tying your boots. Sometimes they'll underbid you. Sometimes they'll shadow you until you've done the hard work, then swoop in to claim the credit. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins formed loose networks for mutual benefit, but in practice, these networks crumble the moment a better opportunity appears. Quirky lesson you've learned? Never share a safe house with another assassin, no matter how charming they seem. One winter you made that mistake. Woke up to find your pack gone, along with the payment from your last job. The thief even took your boots, forcing you to limp barefoot through icy streets until you found a cobbler, willing to take payment in stolen candlesticks. There are rare moments when alliances work, usually for jobs too dangerous or complex for one person alone. But even then, the tension hums under every whispered plan. Who will watch who's back? Who will run if things go wrong? And most importantly, who gets paid first? So you keep your distance. You meet in public, speak in code, and always assume that anyone offering help has already calculated how much you're worth dead. Trust might make the work easier, but mistrust is what keeps you breathing. You've always known this wouldn't be a lifelong career, but the reality hits faster than you expect. The average medieval assassin's working life is short, not because of retirement, but because of sharp steel, a noose, or a suspiciously bad cup of wine. Even without betrayal or arrest, the constant stress grinds you down. Your reflexes dull. Your knees ache from too many nights crouched on cold stone. The thrill that once kept you sharp now feels like a weight pressing behind your ribs. The dangerous truth? Burnout doesn't just make you tired, it makes you sloppy. You hesitate on a rooftop leap, and suddenly you're dangling by one hand. You forget to check the alley for a second guard, and now you're running for your life. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins truly had a prime age, but most agree few lasted more than a decade in active work. That's assuming, of course, they lived that long. One particularly strange but telling fact: some retired assassins tried to reinvent themselves as herbalists or street performers. jobs that allowed them to keep their hands busy without attracting too much suspicion. But even then, you wonder how many truly escaped the shadow of their past. You've seen too many faces disappear. Some you know were caught and executed. Others simply vanished, leaving behind half-empty rooms and cold cooking fires. The unspoken rule is that you never ask where they went, because the answer could be waiting for you too. Every job feels like it could be your last, and if you survive it, the next might be worse. There's no pension plan, no farewell banquet, just the steady knowledge that you've been playing a game with no way to win, only ways to delay losing. If, and it's a very big if, you somehow live long enough to leave the trade, you don't get to retire with fanfare. You fade. You melt into the crowd until no one remembers your name, your face, or the work you did. It's the safest ending an assassin can hope for, and yet it feels like erasing yourself from the world. You pick a new city, maybe even a new country, somewhere your accent won't draw too much attention. You take on an ordinary trade, cobbler, scribe, dockhand, anything that explains the calluses on your hands without inviting questions. You keep your head down and your eyes sharp. Even if the threats are fewer now, they never truly vanish. Nobles have long memories. So do merchants who paid for secrets that might still be worth something. The quirkiest part of this peaceful life, you catch yourself moving like you're still on the job. You sit with your back to the wall. You note exits in every building. You instinctively weigh strangers by how quietly they walk. These habits aren't just muscle memory, they're survival, etched into you deeper than scars. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins ever fully escaped their past or whether retirement was just a slower death in disguise. You suspect it's the latter. The quiet can be as dangerous as the chaos you left behind, giving your mind too much space to wander back to the things you've done. So you let the world forget you. No one tells your story. No one carves your name in stone. You slip into obscurity, just another shadow among many. And in this life, obscurity isn't a tragedy. It's the closest thing to victory you'll ever get. Now the chase is over. The echoes of hurried footsteps fade into the hush of an empty street, the flicker of torchlight sinking into the cool embrace of night. You feel the air slow around you, the tension unwinding from your shoulders like a cloak sliding to the floor. There is no contract tonight, no urgency, no eyes watching from the dark, only the quiet and the steady rhythm of your own breath. The cobblestones beneath your feet are still warm from the day's sun, but cooling bit by bit with every passing moment. A faint breeze drifts through narrow alleys, carrying the smell of wood smoke and bread baked hours ago. Somewhere far off, a single bell tolls and then the silence settles deeper. You lean back against a wall, letting the rough stone press into you, grounding you. Your thoughts drift like leaves on water, touching on fragments of memory before floating away again. A lantern sways gently above a shuttered shop, the light softening to a golden blur. Each sound grows smaller now, the creak of wood, the distant shuffle of someone locking up for the night, the sigh of the wind through a half-open window. Even your heartbeat feels slower, heavier, like it's sinking into the stillness. And here, in this space between wakefulness and dreams, you know that the shadows are no longer something to hide in. They are simply part of the night, holding you, carrying you toward rest. You let your eyes close, the world dimming into gentle darkness, and you breathe in the quiet one last time before sleep takes you. End of script. Sweet dreams.